The look on Brenda's face when I told her I wouldn't be clearing snow from her driveway made me realize she had absolutely no idea who she was dealing with. She stood on my porch that freezing February morning in Boulder, Colorado, wrapped in a cream-colored parka that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, her breath making angry little clouds in the 14-degree air. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" she asked, her voice climbing an octave. I leaned against my doorframe, coffee mug warming my hands. "I said I'm not clearing your driveway, Brenda, or anyone else's in the HOA for that matter. The HOA covenant clearly states that all homeowners are responsible for maintaining the common areas adjacent to their properties during weather events," she said, pulling out her phone to presumably show me some document she'd memorized. "That includes clearing snow from the main thoroughfare when it exceeds 6 inches. That's for common areas, Brenda. Your private driveway isn't a common area." Her face flushed red and not from the cold. "Don't play semantics with me, Kyle. You know perfectly well that during severe weather events, community members are expected to help one another. It's called being neighborly. Neighborly would be asking nicely. Not demanding I show up at 7 in the morning to clear 15 driveways because the HOA failed to arrange proper snow removal." Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. "The board will be hearing about this. We'll be having an emergency meeting this evening at my house, 6 o'clock sharp. I expect you to attend. Can't. I've got work. This is more important than your little business, Kyle. 6 o'clock. She turned and carefully navigated down my snow-covered steps, nearly slipping twice before reaching the sidewalk I hadn't bothered to clear yet. I watched her march back toward her house 3 streets over, her boots crunching in the 8 inches of fresh powder that had fallen overnight. My name is Kyle Zanakis, and I'd lived in the Ridgemont Hills community for exactly 3 years. I'd bought my modest 2-story house with money I'd saved working as a project manager for a commercial property maintenance company in Denver. After 5 years of dealing with corporate nonsense, I'd started my own business with 2 partners, specializing in commercial snow removal, landscaping, and property maintenance. What Brenda Patterson and the rest of the Ridgemont Hills HOA board didn't know was that my company, Zanakis Property Services, held the exclusive contract for snow removal with Alpine Peak Plowing, the only licensed commercial snow removal service within 30 miles of Boulder that could legally operate on private community streets. We'd bought them out 8 months ago when the owner retired, but we'd kept the name and branding for customer recognition. I'd never mentioned my business to anyone in the neighborhood. I kept to myself mostly, went to work before dawn during winter months, came home after dark. My truck was unmarked, and I parked it in my garage. The few neighbors I'd spoken to assumed I worked construction or something similar. The irony of the situation was almost too perfect. The HOA had terminated their snow removal contract with Alpine Peak Plowing 2 months ago in December, right before I closed on the acquisition. According to the public HOA meeting minutes I'd read online, Brenda had convinced the board they were paying too much and could negotiate a better rate with a different company. Except there wasn't a different company. Not one that would service a small residential community of 43 homes for anything less than what Alpine Peak had been charging. I knew this because 3 other companies had called me for equipment rentals when the HOA reached out to them, and all 3 had told me the same thing. The job wasn't worth their time for what Ridgemont Hills wanted to pay. So the HOA had spent January and early February without a snow removal contract, relying on homeowners to clear their own driveways and the main roads. It worked fine during light snows, but last night's storm had dumped 8 inches, with another 6 predicted by evening. The roads in our community were private, which meant the city wouldn't touch them. Without Alpine Peak, the neighborhood was buried. I spent the rest of my morning clearing my own driveway and sidewalk, then headed to the office to manage the crews handling our commercial contracts. We had teams at 3 shopping centers, 2 office parks, and a medical complex. Everyone was slammed, and my phone didn't stop ringing until well after lunch. Around 4 in the afternoon, my business partner Marcus called. "Hey, we got a weird request," he said. "Some woman named Brenda Patterson keeps calling, saying she represents the Ridgemont Hills HOA and needs emergency snow removal for their community. She's offering half our standard rate." I couldn't help but laugh. "Tell her no." Already did 3 times. She keeps calling back, getting more insistent. Now she's saying it's a safety issue and threatening to report us to the city for refusing service. On what grounds? We're a private company. We can refuse any client we want. That's what I told her. She hung up and called back 5 minutes later asking to speak to the owner. "Did you tell her who the owner is?" "Nope. Figured you'd want to handle that yourself." "Let her keep calling. Don't answer. If she leaves voicemails, save them." "You got it, boss. What's the story there?" I filled Marcus in on the morning confrontation and the HOA history. He whistled low. "Man, that's some poetic justice right there. It gets better. She's called an emergency HOA meeting for 6 o'clock tonight. I'm guessing to discuss my lack of community spirit. You going?" "Wouldn't miss it." I left work at 5:30, stopping by my house to change into clean jeans and a sweater. The snow had started falling again, fat flakes that were already accumulating on the roads I'd driven an hour earlier. The forecast was right. This was going to be another heavy one. Brenda's house sat at the top of Ridgemont Circle, a sprawling ranch-style place with stone accents and a 3-car garage. 8 cars were already parked along the street, their windshields collecting snow. I recognized most of them belonging to other board members and the usual busybodies who attended every HOA meeting looking for drama. I knocked on the door and Brenda answered with a tight smile. "Kyle, I'm surprised you actually came. Wouldn't want to miss an emergency meeting." She led me through a foyer decorated with fake rustic charm, all reclaimed wood signs with inspirational quotes and galvanized metal accents. The living room was packed with people sitting on 2 leather couches and various folding chairs arranged in a circle. I recognized Donald Mercer, the board president, a retired accountant with a perpetual scowl. Beside him sat Linda Chen, the treasurer, and Robert Hayes, the secretary. Several other homeowners I knew by sight but not name filled the remaining seats. "Kyle, thanks for joining us," Donald said in a tone that suggested he wasn't thankful at all. "Please, sit." The only empty chair was directly across from Donald, positioned like I was being called to the principal's office. I sat down, scanning the room. Everyone was watching me with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. "I'll get right to it," Donald said, adjusting his glasses. "Brenda came to the board this morning with concerns about your refusal to assist with snow removal during this weather event. Given that we're facing potentially hazardous conditions, the board feels that all able-bodied homeowners should contribute to maintaining safe passage through our community." "I maintain my own property," I said. "My driveway is clear, my sidewalk is clear. What more are you asking?" Brenda leaned forward. "We're asking you to be part of the community, Kyle. When you bought your house here, you agreed to uphold certain standards. That includes helping your neighbors during emergencies. Show me in the HOA covenant where it says I have to clear other people's driveways." Donald pulled out a folder, extracting a printed document. "Section 7, Subsection C states that homeowners must maintain all common areas adjacent to their property, including sidewalks, curbs, and shared roadways in a safe and accessible condition. That's about common areas, not private driveways. The roads are private, Linda interjected. They belong to the HOA collectively, which means they belong to all of us. Therefore, it's reasonable to expect all of us to maintain them. Then hire a snow removal company. The room went quiet. Brenda's face flushed again. We're working on that. The process takes time. In the interim, we need everyone to pitch in. You terminated your contract with Alpine Peak Plowing in December, I said. That gave you 2 months to find a replacement. That's not my problem. How did you know about that? Donald asked sharply. The meeting minutes are public record. You post them on the HOA website. Robert cleared his throat. Be that as it may, we're asking for cooperation, not discussing past board decisions. No, you're demanding I do manual labor to compensate for the board's poor planning. That's not cooperation, that's compulsion. Watch your tone, Brenda snapped. We're all volunteers here, doing our best to manage this community. We don't need your attitude. And I don't need to attend meetings where I'm ambushed and lectured about being a team player. If there's nothing else, I'll head home. Donald raised a hand. Actually, there is something else. The board has discussed this, and we're prepared to levy a fine of $100 per day against any homeowner who refuses to participate in community snow removal efforts during declared weather emergencies. We're declaring one now, effective immediately. I stared at him. You're going to fine me for not clearing snow from other people's driveways. We're going to fine anyone who doesn't contribute to community safety, yes. That's not enforceable. You can't fine people for refusing to perform labor. Linda pushed her own papers forward. According to our legal counsel, we can impose reasonable fines for violations of community standards and safety requirements. Your refusal to maintain common areas during hazardous conditions constitutes such a violation. Your legal counsel is wrong, but feel free to try. I'll see you in court. I stood up to leave, but Brenda blocked my path. Sit down, Kyle. We're not finished. Yes, we are. You have an obligation to this community. I have an obligation to follow the rules I agreed to when I bought my house. Nowhere in those rules does it say I have to be your free labor force because you're too cheap to hire professionals. How dare you, Brenda said, her voice rising. We're trying to save the community money. That benefits everyone, including you. Does it? Because from where I'm standing, you've created a situation where everyone is responsible for clearing several hundred yards of road with their personal snow blowers and shovels. Do you know how long that takes? Hours. Every time it snows. And we're supposed to do this while also working full-time jobs and managing our own properties. Other communities do it, Donald said. Other communities are run by competent boards who understand cost-benefit analysis. That got reactions. Several people started talking at once, voices overlapping in anger. Donald banged his hand on the coffee table. That's enough. Kyle, you're out of line. No, you're out of line. You don't get to fine me for refusing to do something that's not in the covenant. If you want the roads cleared, hire someone to clear them. We can't find anyone, Linda admitted, frustration clear in her voice. Every company we've contacted either won't service a residential community this small or wants to charge twice what we were paying Alpine Peak. Then maybe you shouldn't have terminated the contract. Brenda's eyes narrowed. You know what, Kyle? I think you're enjoying this. I think you like watching the community struggle. I think you're projecting. You're the one who pushed to terminate the contract to save a few bucks and look like a hero. Now it's backfired and you're trying to make it everyone else's problem. Get out, she said, pointing to the door. This meeting is over for you. Gladly. I walked past her into the foyer, grabbing my coat from the rack. Behind me, I could hear urgent whispered conversations starting up. I stepped out into the snow, which was now falling heavily enough to reduce visibility to about 50 feet. The roads were getting bad again, a solid 4 inches of new accumulation on top of the old. My phone rang as I got into my truck. It was Marcus. "Hey, just wanted to update you. That Brenda woman called 6 more times. The last voicemail was pretty heated. She accused us of colluding to keep prices high and said she was going to report us to the Better Business Bureau. She's grasping at straws. There's more. She left her email address and said if the owner doesn't contact her within 24 hours, she's going to blast us on social media and every local business review site she can find. Let her. We have more work than we can handle anyway. We don't need their business. Your call, boss. Just thought you should know it's escalating." After Marcus hung up, I sat in my truck watching snow accumulate on the windshield, thinking through the situation. I could let it play out naturally, watch the HOA struggle through the winter without proper snow removal. Maybe enjoy a little schadenfreude when they finally caved and paid market rate for services. But that seemed petty, and it would make living in the neighborhood uncomfortable for however long I stayed here. Or I could reveal that I owned the company they'd been trying to hire and offer them a contract at a fair rate. That would solve their problem, make me look reasonable, and shut down any future attempts to fine me or anyone else for not performing free labor. The vindictive part of me wanted option 1. The pragmatic part knew option 2 was smarter. I started the truck and headed home, my decision made but not yet acted upon. I'd sleep on it, see how things developed. Sometimes problems solve themselves if you gave them enough time. The next morning, I woke to 12 inches of fresh snow and a text message from Donald Mercer sent at 6:15 a.m. "Kyle, the board has reconsidered the fine structure. We're willing to waive penalties if you agree to clear the section of Ridgemont Circle between your property and the main entrance. This is a one-time request for emergency assistance. Please respond by noon." I deleted the message without responding and spent an hour clearing my own driveway again. My Plow attachment made it easy work and I was done by 8. I could see several neighbors struggling with snow blowers and shovels trying to keep the roads passable. A few waved at me. Most ignored me, probably having heard about last night's meeting. At the office, chaos reigned. We had crews spread across a dozen locations, 2 trucks with mechanical issues, and a new client demanding immediate service at a warehouse complex that hadn't been on this morning's schedule. I spent the entire day putting out fires, barely remembering to eat lunch. Marcus found me in the parking lot at 4 o'clock, watching our crews prep equipment for the evening shift. "So I'm guessing you haven't checked your email today. Haven't had time." "Why?" He handed me his tablet, showing an email sent to our company's general contact address. It was from Brenda Patterson, time-stamped 11:43 a.m., and it was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate speak. "To whom it may concern," it began. "I am writing on behalf of the Ridgemont Hills Homeowners Association to formally request snow removal services for our community of 43 homes. We require immediate assistance due to hazardous road conditions that pose significant safety risks to our residents. Despite multiple attempts to contact your company by phone, we have received no response, which we find deeply concerning given your advertised commitment to customer service. We understand that your company, Alpine Peak Plowing, previously serviced our community until we mutually agreed to terminate that relationship in December. We are now prepared to re-engage your services, provided you can offer competitive pricing that reflects the current market conditions and the long-term nature of a potential contract. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss terms. Time is of the essence. Regards, Brenda Patterson, Ridgemont Hills HOA board member. I read it twice. Mutually agreed to terminate the relationship. That's my favorite part, Marcus said. I pulled the old files. Alpine Peak sent them 3 renewal options in November, all at reasonable rates with slight increases to account for fuel costs. The HOA sent back a letter saying they were exploring other options and wouldn't be renewing. There was nothing mutual about it. She's rewriting history to save face. So what do you want to do? I can respond, tell them we're booked solid and can't take on new clients. I thought about it, watching snow start falling again from the darkening sky. The forecast called for another 6 inches tonight, 4 tomorrow afternoon, and a major storm on Saturday that could dump up to 18 inches. Ridgemont Hills was about to become completely impassable without professional help. No, I said slowly. I'll handle this one personally. I went back to my office and composed a response from my company email address, using my full signature with title and contact information. I kept it professional and direct. Dear Miss Patterson, thank you for your inquiry regarding snow removal services for Ridgemont Hills. I understand your community is experiencing significant difficulties with the recent weather. I'd be happy to discuss a service contract. However, I should clarify that Alpine Peak Plowing is now owned and operated by Zanacki's Property Services, which I founded and manage. We acquired the company in August of last year. I've reviewed our records from your previous contract, and I can offer you the same service level at our standard residential community rate, which is 12% higher than what you were paying last year. This increase reflects current fuel costs, equipment maintenance, insurance, and labor rates. The contract would be seasonal, running through April 15th, with services rendered within 6 hours of any snowfall exceeding 3 inches. If you'd like to discuss this further, I'm available to meet at your convenience. Best regards, Kyle Zanackis, owner and CEO, Zanacki's Property Services. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Marcus read over my shoulder and whistled. You just dropped a bomb. She was going to find out eventually. True, but this way you control the narrative. Smart. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Unknown number, I answered. Kyle Zanackis. You. Brenda's voice was cold enough to freeze water. You own Alpine Peak. I own the company that acquired Alpine Peak, yes. When were you planning to mention this? It wasn't relevant until you started demanding I clear your driveway. Silence stretched for several seconds. I could hear her breathing, fast and angry. This is a conflict of interest. How so? You live in the community. You can't be both a resident and a service provider. Sure I can. There's nothing in the HOA rules preventing homeowners from operating businesses that service the community. In fact, Linda Chen's husband runs the landscaping company that maintains our common areas in summer. That's different. It's exactly the same. More silence. Then, the board will need to discuss this. That's fine. But you should know that the offer expires Friday at 5 p.m. After that, we're fully booked through the end of the season and won't have capacity to take on new clients. You're trying to pressure us. I'm stating facts. We have limited equipment and crews. If you want service, I need to know soon so I can adjust schedules. Your rate is too high. We can't afford a 12% increase. Then find another company. But you've already discovered there aren't any other options at any price. So your choices are pay my rate, continue trying to manage snow removal yourselves, or wait until spring. It's up to you. She hung up without responding. Marcus was grinning. Man, I wish I could have seen her face. She's probably calling an emergency board meeting right now. You think they'll accept? They don't have a choice. Another storm is coming Saturday and the roads are already barely passable. Someone's going to get stuck or have a medical emergency they can't get out for, and the board will be liable. I was right about the emergency meeting. Linda Chen called me an hour later, her tone formal and stiff. The board requests your presence at a meeting tonight at 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse to discuss your proposal. I'll be there. The clubhouse was a small building at the entrance to Ridgemont Hills, mostly used for HOA meetings and the occasional community event. When I arrived, the parking lot was full, way more cars than should be there for a board meeting. I walked in to find at least 30 people packed into the main room, sitting on folding chairs or standing along the walls. This wasn't a board meeting. This was a town hall. Donald stood at the front next to a projector screen, his face grim. He gestured to an empty chair facing the crowd. "Kyle, thank you for coming. Please sit." I remained standing. I was told this was a board meeting to discuss a service contract. The board felt that given the unusual circumstances, the full community should have input on this decision. The community doesn't get to vote on who you hire for snow removal. That's a board decision. Brenda stood up from the front row. "This affects everyone, Kyle. Your conflict of interest affects everyone. We deserve transparency." I looked around the room at familiar faces, neighbors I'd waved to and nodded at for 3 years. Most looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. A few looked curious, waiting to see how this played out. "Fine," I said. "Let's be transparent. The board terminated the snow removal contract in December to save money. They failed to secure a replacement service provider. Now we've had 3 major snowstorms, the roads are hazardous, and they're desperate for help. I own a company that can provide that help at a fair market rate. There's no conflict of interest. There's just business." "But you live here," said a man I recognized from a few houses down, Greg something. "You benefit from clear roads just like the rest of us. Why should we pay you to do something that benefits you?" "Because I'm providing a professional service with commercial equipment, insurance, and expertise. You benefit from having a doctor in the community, but you still pay for medical care. Same principle." A woman in the back raised her hand. "How do we know you're not price gouging? You said your rate is 12% higher than before. Fuel costs are up 8% year over year. Insurance is up 15%. Labor costs are up 10%. My rate increase is actually below the average increase in operational costs. I can provide documentation if you'd like." Donald cleared his throat. "The board has concerns about the appearance of impropriety, Kyle. It looks like you're taking advantage of a situation you partly created." "How did I create this situation?" "You didn't mention you owned a snow removal company when the board was looking for alternatives to Alpine Peak. You didn't ask, and even if I had mentioned it, you made clear you wanted cheaper service. My rates haven't changed. You would have rejected my proposal just like you rejected Alpine Peak's renewal offer." Brenda stood again. "We rejected Alpine Peak because they were overcharging us. Now you're trying to do the same thing. Define overcharging." "You were paying $93 per service call for full community clearance within 6 hours. I'm offering the same service for $104 per call. Do you know what other companies quoted you?" Silence. "I do," I continued. "Because 3 of them called me to rent equipment when you reached out. They quoted you between $150 and $200 per call, and they all said the job wasn't worth it even at those rates. So either accept that you had a good deal before and you have a good deal now, or keep trying to clear the roads yourselves." Linda stood, holding up her phone. I've been researching average costs while we've been talking. Kyle's rate is actually 15% below the regional average for residential community snow removal. Then why didn't Alpine Peak tell us that when we were negotiating? Brenda demanded. They did, I said. I read the correspondence. They sent you comparison data from 3 other companies. You ignored it. The room erupted in cross-talk, people arguing with each other, the board members looking increasingly flustered. Donald banged a gavel on the table. Order, please. Let's stay focused. I'll make this simple, I said, raising my voice over the noise. I've offered a standard contract at a fair rate. Take it or leave it. But decide by Friday, because after that, I'm withdrawing the offer and you can deal with the winter on your own. You can't do that, Brenda said. You have a responsibility as a community member. I have a responsibility to maintain my own property, which I'm doing. I have no legal, moral, or ethical responsibility to provide discounted professional services to a community that's made clear they don't value those services. This is extortion, someone called from the back. No, extortion is threatening harm to coerce payment. I'm offering a service at market rate. You're free to decline. Robert raised his hand for quiet. Kyle, help us understand something. If you live here and you own a snow removal company, why didn't you offer your services before? Why wait until we're in crisis? That was a fair question, and I'd known it was coming. Because I keep my work and home life separate. I don't advertise my business to neighbors. I don't solicit clients in the community. When I'm here, I'm just a homeowner. But you made it my business when you demanded I clear your driveways and threatened to fine me for refusing. We were asking for help, Linda said quietly. No, you were demanding free labor. There's a difference. The room fell silent. I could see people processing that, some nodding slowly, others still looking skeptical. Finally, Donald spoke. The board needs time to deliberate. Can you give us until Thursday, Friday at 5 p.m.? That's the deadline. That's not much time. There's another major storm coming Saturday. If you want service before then, I need time to schedule crews and equipment. Every day you wait makes that harder. I left without waiting for a response, walking out into the snow that now covered my truck's windshield again. I sat in the cold cab, letting the engine warm up, and wondered if I just made a huge mistake. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut, let the HOA flounder, stayed out of it entirely. But the truth was, watching people struggle with inadequate equipment in dangerous weather didn't sit right with me, even if I disagreed with how the board had handled things. And maybe, just maybe, this would teach them a lesson about valuing professional services. I drove home slowly on the snow-packed roads, passing neighbors with shovels and snow blowers making minimal progress against the accumulation. My phone rang twice before I got home. I ignored both calls. The next 2 days were a blur of work, weather, and increasingly frantic messages from various board members. Wednesday brought another 4 inches of snow, and a voicemail from Robert asking if we could negotiate on price. Thursday morning delivered 6 more inches, and an email from Linda with a detailed breakdown of the HOA's budget, implying they couldn't afford my rate. I responded to Linda's email with financial projections showing that attempting to manage snow removal through homeowner labor was actually costing them more in lost time, equipment wear, and potential liability than a professional service. I didn't budge on price. Thursday evening at 6:30, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Donald on my porch, looking exhausted. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, letting him into the foyer. He stomped snow off his boots onto the mat. "I'm here unofficially. The board hasn't sent me." "Okay," I wanted to apologize. "Brenda was wrong to demand you clear her driveway. The board was wrong to threaten fines. We were desperate and handled it poorly. Apology accepted. He looked surprised. Just like that. I understand desperation. You made bad decisions under pressure. It happens. The thing is, Kyle, we really can't afford your rate. I know you showed us it's fair, and I believe you. But the HOA budget is tight. We've had unexpected expenses this year. The roof on the clubhouse needed repairs. We had to replace a section of fence after a tree fell on it, and we're still paying off a special assessment from last year for road resurfacing. Have you considered raising the HOA dues? We raised them 8% last year for the road work. People complained loudly. If we raise them again, there will be a revolt. I thought about it, looking at this tired old man who'd probably spent his retirement being verbally abused at HOA meetings by people who didn't want to pay for anything. What if I offered a discount? His eyes widened. You would do that? Not a big one. 5% off the quoted rate. That brings it to about $99 per call, just $6 more than you were paying before. That would help. I think I could sell that to the board. But there are conditions. He waited. 1. The contract is for 2 years, not just this season. It locks in this rate through next winter. 2. Payment is due within 15 days of service, no exceptions. Late payments incur a 10% penalty. 3. Brenda Patterson publicly acknowledges that she made a mistake demanding free labor from homeowners. Donald's expression became pained. Kyle, come on. Brenda won't do that. Then no discount. I'm not doing this to punish anyone, Donald, but I need to know the board understands boundaries. I'm a neighbor and a service provider, but I'm not your employee or your servant. If Brenda can't recognize that, then this arrangement won't work. Let me talk to her. You have until tomorrow at 5. He left, shoulders slumped against the cold. I felt a little bad, but not much. Accountability mattered, especially from people in positions of authority. Friday afternoon arrived with clear skies and bright sunshine that did nothing to melt the accumulated snow. I was in a meeting with a potential new client when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I ignored it until the meeting ended at 4:15, then checked my messages. It was from Linda Chen, sent to my company email with Donald, Robert, and Brenda copied. Dear Kyle, the board has voted to accept your proposed contract with the 5% discount under the terms you specified. We appreciate your willingness to work with us on pricing. Attached is the signed contract. We request service as soon as possible, given the predicted storm tomorrow. Brenda has asked me to convey that she recognizes her approach last week was inappropriate, and she apologizes for demanding labor rather than requesting assistance. She acknowledges that homeowners are not obligated to provide free services to the HOA. We look forward to working with Zanaki's Property Services. Best regards, Linda Chen, Treasurer, Ridgemont Hills HOA. Marcus read it over my shoulder. That's the most passive-aggressive apology I've ever seen. It'll do. Get a crew scheduled for tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. start time. I want the community completely cleared before the storm hits. You're not going yourself. No, I'm going to sleep in, drink coffee, and watch from my window. Saturday morning, I did exactly that, standing in my kitchen in pajamas and a bathrobe, watching 2 of our trucks with plow attachments systematically clear every road in Ridgemont Hills. They started at the entrance and worked their way through each street, pushing snow into designated areas, clearing around mailboxes and fire hydrants, doing the job professionally and efficiently. The whole operation took 3 hours. By 9:30, the roads were clearer than they'd been all winter. I saw neighbors coming out of their houses, some taking pictures, others just staring in appreciation at the perfectly cleared pavement. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Thank you. This is what we needed. Simple, direct, acknowledging reality. I liked Linda. The storm hit Saturday evening and it was a monster. By Sunday morning, we had 21 inches of fresh snow, the most in a single storm in 5 years. I watched the news showing scenes from around Boulder, cars buried, people stranded, the city struggling to keep major roads open. Our crew returned to Ridgemont Hills at 7 a.m. Sunday and cleared everything again by noon. This time, several neighbors came out to thank them personally. One woman brought coffee and donuts. Another took photos and posted them on the community Facebook page with glowing comments about the service. Monday morning I checked that Facebook page, something I rarely did, and found a thread that had blown up over the weekend. It started with someone asking what had changed, why the roads were suddenly being cleared properly. Someone else explained about the new contract with Zenaki's Property Services. Then someone connected the dots that I was Kyle Zenakis, the homeowner who'd been threatened with fines. The thread exploded with comments, people taking sides, rehashing the conflict, arguing about whether I'd been right or wrong. Most comments supported me. A few defended Brenda. One person suggested the whole situation had been a setup, that I deliberately withheld information about my company to create leverage. That was absurd, but conspiracy theories always sounded good to some people. I closed the page and ignored it. Social media drama wasn't worth my time. What I didn't ignore was the certified letter that arrived Tuesday from the law office of Mitchell and Stone. It was addressed to Zenaki's Property Services, and it was a formal complaint from the Ridgemont Hills HOA alleging breach of fiduciary duty, conflict of interest, and fraudulent business practices. I read it twice, then called my own attorney, Patricia Reynolds. She listened to my summary, asked for a copy of the letter and all related documents, and called me back 3 hours later. "This is frivolous," Patricia said bluntly. "They don't have a case. You're not a board member, so there's no fiduciary duty. There's no conflict of interest in providing services to a community where you live, and there's nothing fraudulent about offering a standard contract at market rates. So what do? I'll draft a response explaining why their claims are baseless. But Kyle, be prepared for this to get messy. Whoever filed this complaint isn't interested in reality. They're trying to intimidate you, Brenda. Probably. Does she have support on the board? I'm not sure. Donald seemed reasonable. Linda definitely was. I don't know about Robert. I'll handle the legal response. You focus on fulfilling the contract and documenting everything. Every service call, every communication, every payment. If this goes further, we'll need a paper trail. The letter had come from Mitchell and Stone, but it was signed by Brenda Patterson on behalf of the HOA board. That meant either the full board had voted to pursue legal action or Brenda was acting independently. I needed to find out which. I called Linda. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Kyle, I suppose you got the letter." "I did. Did the board vote on this?" Long pause. "No." Brenda hired an attorney on her own and claimed she was representing the HOA. We didn't find out until after the letter was sent. So she's acting without authority. Technically, any board member can take action on behalf of the HOA if they believe it's in the community's interest. But she should have brought it to a vote first. Donald is furious. "Is there going to be a board meeting about this? Tomorrow night, emergency session, you should probably attend." "Will my attorney be allowed?" "I don't see why not." I called Patricia back and asked if she could attend a meeting on 24 hours notice. She said yes, and quoted me her hourly rate, which made me wince but seemed necessary. Wednesday night, Patricia and I arrived at the clubhouse to find another packed room. This time the energy was different, less angry and more uncertain. People were whispering in clusters, shooting glances at Brenda, who sat alone in the front row with her arms crossed. Donald called the meeting to order and immediately addressed the elephant in the room. Before we discuss anything else, I want to clarify that the legal complaint sent to Zanaki's Property Services was not authorized by the full board. Brenda acted independently, which is within her rights as a board member, but it does not represent the consensus position of this board. Brenda stood up. I acted to protect the community's interests. Kyle Zanakis engaged in deceptive practices by not disclosing his business ownership while the board was seeking snow removal services. Patricia stood. If I may address that claim. I'm Patricia Reynolds, representing Mr. Zanakis and Zanakis Property Services. The allegation of deceptive practices is baseless. My client had no obligation to disclose his business ownership to the HOA. He's not a board member. He has no fiduciary duty to this community beyond adhering to the covenant rules, and he didn't engage in any negotiations or discussions about snow removal until after the HOA had already failed to secure alternative services. He lives here, Brenda shot back. He should have volunteered the information. Why? Do you volunteer information about your profession to your neighbors? Does anyone in this room? Mr. Zanakis keeps his professional and personal life separate, which is his right. Robert raised his hand. But isn't there some conflict in being both a resident and a service provider? What if there's a dispute about service quality? What if we want to terminate the contract? The contract has standard terms for dispute resolution and termination, Patricia said. It's the same contract Mr. Zanakis uses for all residential community clients. There's nothing special or different about this arrangement except that he happens to live in the community. That's not a conflict. It's a coincidence. I disagree, Brenda said. And I believe many residents agree with me. This is inappropriate and we should void the contract. On what grounds? Linda asked. We signed a valid contract for services we desperately needed. Those services are being provided professionally and on time. What exactly is inappropriate? The circumstances under which the contract was signed. We were under duress. Patricia almost laughed. Duress requires threats or coercion. Offering a standard business contract is neither. Miss Patterson, your legal complaint is going to be dismissed, and if you pursue it, my client will countersue for legal fees and harassment. The room went silent. Brenda's face flushed deep red. You're threatening me. I'm stating legal reality. You filed a frivolous complaint to intimidate a legitimate business owner. That opens you to liability. Donald banged his gavel. Let's all take a breath. Patricia, thank you for clarifying the legal position. Brenda, I think we need to reconsider this approach. I'm not backing down, Brenda said. Kyle took advantage of this community. How? I asked, speaking for the first time. By offering a service you needed at a fair price. You waited until we were desperate. You were desperate because you made a bad decision. That's not my fault. You could have mentioned your company earlier. You could have helped. I could have. But I wasn't obligated to. And frankly, Brenda, after you showed up at my door demanding I clear your driveway, treating me like hired help, I wasn't feeling particularly generous. So this is revenge. No, this is business. You need snow removal. I provide snow removal. We have a contract. That's all there is to it. A woman in the third row stood up. I recognized her as Jennifer Anderson, who lived on my street. Can I say something? I've lived here for 8 years. I've served on the board. I've seen how these things go. Brenda, you made a mistake terminating the Alpine Peak contract without securing a replacement. We all know it. Trying to blame Kyle for that mistake doesn't change reality. He's providing good service at a fair price. Maybe we should just say thank you and move on. Several people murmured agreement. Brenda looked around the room, seeing her support evaporating, and sat down hard. Donald looked relieved. I propose the board votes to withdraw the legal complaint and issue a formal apology to Kyle and Zanaki's Property Services. All in favor? Linda and Robert immediately raised their hands. Donald raised his. Brenda sat with her arms crossed, glaring at the floor. Motion carries 3-1. Brenda, I need you to contact the attorney tomorrow and withdraw the complaint. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. Patricia leaned over to whisper in my ear. That was easier than I expected. Give it time, I whispered back. She's not done. I was right. Over the next week, Brenda embarked on a subtle campaign to make my life difficult. She filed a complaint with the city zoning office claiming I was running a commercial business from my residential property. That got dismissed immediately when I showed documentation that my business was registered to our commercial office address, not my home. She posted on the community Facebook page, questioning the quality of our snow removal, claiming we damaged a mailbox. I had time-stamped photos from our trucks showing the mailbox was already damaged before we arrived. She filed a formal HOA complaint claiming my truck violated the covenant rules about commercial vehicles parked in driveways. That also got dismissed because my truck wasn't commercial tagged, and the covenant only prohibited vehicles over a certain weight class. Each complaint took time to address, generated paperwork, and was clearly intended to harass rather than raise legitimate concerns. After the third one, I called Donald. You need to get her under control, I said. This is getting ridiculous. I know. The board is discussing options. We're considering a vote to remove her. Can you do that? It's complicated. We'd need a supermajority of homeowners to approve it, which means a special election. That takes time and creates its own drama. What if she keeps filing false complaints? Then we document them and potentially pursue legal action against her for harassment. But Kyle, that's a last resort. It would tear the community apart. He was right, but I was running out of patience. The situation came to a head 2 weeks later when we had another significant snowfall, 8 inches overnight. Our crew arrived at 6 a.m. as contracted and began clearing the roads. At 7:15, I got a call from Tony, one of our operators. Boss, we've got a problem. There's a woman blocking the road, won't let us plow her street. What woman? Says her name is Brenda. She's parked her car sideways across the entrance to Ridgemont Circle and refuses to move. Says we're trespassing. I closed my eyes, counted to 10. I'll be right there. I arrived 20 minutes later to find exactly what Tony described. Brenda had parked her Mercedes across the narrow entrance to her street, blocking our truck. She stood next to the car, arms crossed, glaring at Tony. I parked and walked over. Brenda, move your car. You're not plowing this street. Yes, we are. We have a contract. I don't consent to your services on my street. You don't have to consent. The HOA hired us to plow all community roads. Your street is a community road. I'm a homeowner. I have a right to refuse service. Actually, you don't. The HOA board makes decisions about common area maintenance, not individual homeowners. You know this, Brenda. You were part of the board that voted to approve this contract. I voted against it, but you were outvoted. That's how boards work. I don't care. You're not plowing this street. Tony leaned out of his truck window. Boss, we've got 6 other locations to hit today. We can't sit here all morning. I pulled out my phone and called Donald. He answered sounding half asleep. Kyle, it's 7:30 in the morning. Brenda is blocking our truck from plowing Ridgemont Circle. She's parked across the street entrance and refusing to move. Silence. Then, I'll be right there. While we waited, Brenda and I stood in the cold, not speaking. Other residents started coming out of their houses, seeing what the holdup was. A few called out questions. One man offered to help move Brenda's car. She told him to mind his own business. Donald arrived 15 minutes later, still wearing pajama pants under his winter coat. He assessed the situation, sighed deeply, and approached Brenda. "Move your car." "No, Brenda, you're interfering with contracted services. This is grounds for legal action. Sue me." "I don't want to sue you. I want you to move your car so these men can do their jobs." "They can do everyone else's street, not mine." "That's not how this works." "I don't care how it works. I'm exercising my rights as a homeowner." Donald turned to me. "Kyle, I'm sorry about this. Can you come back later? We can skip this street for now, but it puts us behind schedule. And if she does this every time we come, it defeats the purpose of having a contract." "She won't do it every time." "Yes, I will," Brenda said. I looked at Donald. "Then you need to call the police and have her car towed for obstructing a private road." His eyes widened. "Kyle, let's not escalate." "She's already escalated. We have a legal contract. She's interfering with that contract. That's a civil matter at minimum, possibly criminal depending on how the police interpret obstruction laws. You're going to have me arrested for parking on my own street." Brenda said incredulously. "It's not your street. It's a private community road owned collectively by the HOA. You don't have the right to block it." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "This is insane. You're insane." "Actually, I think what's insane is going to these lengths to avoid having your street plowed." "What's the end game here, Brenda? You block us today, we come back tomorrow, you block us again. How long can you keep this up?" "As long as it takes." "For what? You're not proving a point. You're not protecting the community. You're just being petty because you didn't get your way." "I'm standing up to a bully." That actually made me laugh. "I'm the bully. I offered a service. You hired me. Now you're literally blocking the road to prevent me from providing that service." "Who's the bully here?" A crowd had gathered, maybe 15 neighbors watching the confrontation. Someone started recording on their phone. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. Donald pulled out his phone. "I'm calling for a vote. Emergency board decision. All board members, I need you to respond to the group text I'm sending right now. The question is, do we authorize police intervention to remove Brenda Patterson's vehicle from obstructing contracted snow removal services?" He typed rapidly. Hit send. We all stood in the cold, breath-making clouds, waiting. My phone buzzed. Someone had already posted the video to Facebook. Donald's phone dinged, then dinged again. He read the messages. "Linda votes yes. Robert votes yes. That's a majority." He looked at Brenda with something like sadness. "I'm calling the police. You have 2 minutes to move your car before I make that call." "You're choosing him over me?" Brenda asked. "Over a fellow board member. I'm choosing to honor a legal contract over enabling someone's vendetta." 2 minutes, Brenda." She stared at him, then at me, then at the crowd of neighbors watching. Whatever she saw in their faces must have convinced her she'd lost. She got in her car, started the engine, and slowly backed out of the way. Tony immediately put the truck in gear and began plowing. Brenda sat in her running car watching, her face unreadable. Donald approached her window. She rolled it down. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, it is. The board is meeting tonight to discuss your position. I'm going to recommend we remove you for cause." "You can't do that." "Actually, we can. The bylaws allow for removal of board members who engage in conduct detrimental to the community. I'd say blocking essential services qualifies." He walked away without waiting for her response. I followed him to his car. "Donald, I'm sorry this got so messy. It's not your fault. Brenda has been difficult for years. This situation just brought everything to a head." He rubbed his face tiredly. "The worst part is, She probably had good intentions initially. She wanted to save the community money, but she can't admit when she's wrong, and that makes her dangerous. What happens now? Board meeting tonight, like I said. We'll vote on her removal. If we succeed, we'll hold a special election for a replacement. If we fail, I'm resigning. I'm too old for this drama. He drove away, leaving me standing in the street with melting snow soaking through my boots. I looked up at Brenda's house, saw her watching from a front window. Our eyes met for a moment before she turned away. The board meeting that night was standing room only, with at least 40 people packed into the clubhouse. I didn't attend, figuring my presence would only inflame things, but Linda texted me updates throughout. The vote to remove Brenda from the board passed 4-0, with Brenda abstaining and arguing the vote was invalid. Donald had consulted an attorney who confirmed the process was legal. Brenda threatened to sue. The board voted to retain legal counsel if she did. Then things got interesting. During the open comment period, 3 homeowners stood up and accused Brenda of misusing HOA funds to pay for her personal legal complaints against me. They demanded an audit of the HOA finances. Linda, as treasurer, said she'd been reviewing the books and had found several questionable transactions over the past 6 months. Nothing definitively fraudulent, but enough irregularities to warrant further investigation. Brenda walked out of the meeting at that point. According to Linda's text, she was pale and shaking. The next morning, I got a call from a Detective Morrison with the Boulder Police Department. "Mr. Zanakis, I'm investigating allegations of embezzlement from the Ridgemont Hills HOA. Your name came up in the context of a civil dispute. I'd like to ask you some questions." I called Patricia, who advised me to cooperate fully. That afternoon, I met Detective Morrison at a coffee shop in downtown Boulder and walked him through the entire timeline. The terminated snow removal contract, Brenda's demands that I clear driveways, the new contract with my company, the harassment campaign, and yesterday's road blocking incident. "Did you ever see or hear anything suggesting Miss Patterson was misusing HOA funds?" he asked. "No. I had minimal interaction with the board's finances. I submitted invoices and got paid. That's it." "Did she ever ask you for kickbacks or special arrangements?" "Never." "If anything, she fought against paying market rates." He made notes, asked a few more questions, then thanked me for my time. "For what it's worth, Mr. Zanakis, it sounds like you got caught in the middle of someone's control issues. The investigation is about potential fraud, not your business relationship with the HOA." "What kind of fraud?" "I can't discuss details of an active investigation, but let's just say the HOA's books don't balance and a significant amount of money is unaccounted for." Over the next 2 weeks, the story came out in pieces, mostly through community gossip and cryptic updates from Linda. The HOA had hired a forensic accountant to review the books. They discovered that Brenda had been writing checks to herself over the past 18 months, claiming reimbursement for various community expenses that were either inflated or non-existent. The total was somewhere around $34,000. Not a massive amount, but enough to constitute a felony. Brenda claimed the expenses were legitimate and that she had receipts. When pressed to produce those receipts, she couldn't. She claimed they'd been destroyed in a basement flood, but several neighbors pointed out that her house didn't have a basement. The HOA board voted to file a police report. Detective Morrison's investigation expanded. In March, Brenda Patterson was arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft from a common interest community, which Colorado law treated as an enhanced offense. I watched from my window as police cars pulled up to her house on a gray Tuesday morning. She was led out in handcuffs, still in her cream-colored parka, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Her husband followed the police car in his own vehicle, looking shell-shocked. The community Facebook page exploded with reactions ranging from shock to vindication to sympathy. Several people posted that they'd always suspected something was off about how Brenda handled HOA finances. Others defended her, saying she'd been dedicated to the community, and this was a misunderstanding. I stayed out of it. My contract with the HOA continued without incident. We cleared snow through the rest of February and March, handled the final big storm in early April, and concluded the season with perfect records for response time and service quality. In April, Linda called me. "Kyle, the board wanted to reach out about renewing the contract for next year. We're extremely satisfied with your work. I appreciate that. The current contract runs through next winter, though." "Right, but we wanted to get ahead of things. No surprises this time." She paused. "Also, we wanted to apologize officially for everything that happened. The board is preparing a formal letter, but I wanted to say it personally. You were treated unfairly, and we should have handled the entire situation better from the start." "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot. We also wanted to ask if you'd consider offering other services. Landscaping, maybe. We're going out for bids on the summer maintenance contract, and if your rates are competitive, we'd love to keep everything with one company." I thought about it. My company did handle landscaping, and having a local contract would be convenient. "Send me the specifications. I'll put together a proposal." "Perfect. And Kyle, for what it's worth, most of the community really appreciates what you do. Don't judge us all by Brenda's behavior." "I don't. Every community has difficult people. You just got unlucky that yours ended up on the board." In May, Brenda Patterson pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud as part of a plea agreement. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, suspended pending completion of 5 years probation, community service, and full restitution to the HOA plus penalties. She and her husband put their house up for sale immediately. I saw the "for sale" sign go up from my window. Part of me felt bad for her. She'd made terrible choices, destroyed her reputation, and faced legal consequences that would follow her for years. But another part of me recognized that accountability mattered. She'd abused her position, stolen from her neighbors, and tried to bully people who disagreed with her. Actions had consequences. In June, new neighbors moved into Brenda's old house. A young couple with twin toddlers, friendly and unpretentious. They introduced themselves one Saturday while I was mowing my lawn. We chatted about the neighborhood, the HOA, the community amenities. They didn't ask about the previous owners, and I didn't volunteer information. That chapter was closed. My company's contract with Ridgemont Hills HOA expanded to include full landscaping services through the summer. We maintained the common areas, handled irrigation repairs, and even did some tree work after a windstorm in July. Every invoice was paid on time. Every interaction was professional. And slowly, I became just another service provider to the community rather than the center of drama. I continued to keep my professional and personal life separate. I didn't advertise my business to neighbors or talk about work at community events. When people asked what I did, I said I ran a property maintenance company. Most didn't ask for details. In August, the HOA held its annual meeting to elect new board members. Donald Mercer announced his retirement after 15 years of service. Linda Chen ran for president and won unanimously. Robert Hayes remained as secretary. 2 new members joined the board, both younger homeowners who brought fresh perspectives and, hopefully, less drama. During the meeting, Linda publicly thanked Zanaki's Property Services for excellent work throughout the year. A few people applauded. I wasn't there to hear it, but Linda sent me a text with a photo of the moment. It made me smile. September brought the first hints of fall, leaves turning gold and red, temperatures dropping at night. I started prepping equipment for the coming winter season, scheduling maintenance, ordering parts, hiring seasonal staff. Marcus and I reviewed our client list and realized we'd grown 20% over the past year. We might need to expand the fleet, Marcus said, looking at spreadsheets in the office. If we take on any more communities like Ridgemont Hills, we'll be stretched thin during major storms. Let's get through one more winter before making that call, I said. See how the new contracts perform. Fair enough. But boss, I gotta say, that whole situation worked out pretty well for you in the end. It worked out well for everyone. The community gets reliable service, we get steady work, and everyone learned some lessons about communication and respect. And Brenda learned not to steal from her neighbors. That too. The first snow of the new season fell in late October, just 3 inches of light powder that barely required plowing. We hit Ridgemont Hills at dawn anyway, making sure the roads were clear before morning rush hour. I drove one of the trucks myself, enjoying the quiet meditation of early morning work, the satisfaction of leaving clean pavement behind. As I finished the last street, I saw someone waving from a driveway. It was Jennifer Anderson, the woman who'd spoken up for me at that contentious board meeting. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. Just wanted to say thanks, she called out. My daughter has to catch the school bus at 7 and having clear roads makes such a difference. Just doing my job. Well, you do it well. We're lucky to have you. She went back inside, and I sat in the idling truck for a moment, warm air blowing from the vents, snow beginning to fall again in lazy spirals. Lucky to have me. It was a strange feeling, being appreciated for work I'd initially taken on out of spite and pragmatism. But maybe that's how most good things happened. Not through grand plans or noble intentions, but through ordinary people navigating difficult situations and choosing, eventually, to do the right thing. I put the truck in gear and headed toward the community exit, already planning the route for the next location. Behind me, Ridgemont Hills was waking up, lights coming on in windows, people starting their days on clear roads and safe streets. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There were no big confrontations or final showdowns. Just a community that had been through turmoil, learned some hard lessons, and come out the other side better for it. Just neighbors who'd seen the worst of each other and chosen to move forward anyway. Just winter coming again, and me with my trucks and my crews, ready to face whatever weather arrived. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just doing good work and letting that speak for itself. It's holding boundaries and demanding respect without needing to punish anyone. It's recognizing that people are messy and complicated, that communities are built on thousands of small interactions, and that grace and accountability can coexist. I drove out through the entrance of Ridgemont Hills, past the clubhouse where so many meetings had been held, so many arguments voiced, so many resolutions reached. The sign at the entrance read Ridgemont Hills, a community of neighbors. For the first time since I'd moved in 3 years ago, that felt like more than just a slogan. It felt true. The snow kept falling as I headed toward downtown Boulder, the city spreading out below the foothills in the gray morning light. My phone buzzed with incoming service requests. Marcus was probably already fielding calls from clients, dispatching crews, managing the organized chaos that came with winter weather. I had a business to run, equipment to maintain, people to manage. The drama of HOA politics seemed small in the rearview mirror, just one chapter in a much longer story about building something worthwhile. but I'd learned something valuable from the whole experience. I'd learned that hiding parts of yourself, even for good reasons like maintaining privacy, could create misunderstandings. I'd learned that clear communication mattered more than being right. I'd learned that people in positions of authority could abuse that trust, and that communities needed accountability mechanisms to prevent it. Most importantly, I'd learned that my neighbors were just people, flawed and struggling and trying their best, same as me. Even Brenda, in her own misguided way, had been trying to serve the community she loved. She'd just gone about it in the worst possible way, letting ego and control issues override common sense. I hoped she was getting help, wherever she was. I hoped her family was recovering from the scandal. I hoped she'd learned something from the consequences of her actions. But mostly, I hoped Ridgemont Hills would thrive, that the new board members would govern wisely, that the community would come together during future challenges with more grace than they'd shown during this one. I pulled into our company lot, parking next to the other trucks returning from early morning routes. Tony waved from his cab, giving me a thumbs up. Maria, one of our newer drivers, was already prepping her truck for a second run. This was my world. Not HOA meetings and neighbor disputes, but engines and equipment, routes and schedules, the practical business of keeping things running smoothly when nature decided to dump frozen water on everything. I grabbed my tablet and headed into the office, ready to tackle the day's challenges. The board meetings and legal drama were behind me. Winter was ahead with all its demands and complications, and I was ready for it. The office smelled like coffee and diesel exhaust, familiar and comforting. Marcus looked up from his computer as I walked in. "Morning, boss. We've got a situation developing at the medical complex. Their backup generator is blocked by snow and they need immediate access. Send whoever's closest. Bill them emergency rates. Already done." Also, that property management company from Louisville called again about taking over their portfolio. 8 commercial properties, all within 20 miles. Set up a meeting for next week. We'll need to run the numbers carefully. On it. I settled into my desk, logging into systems, checking weather forecasts, reviewing schedules. This was the work that mattered. Not winning arguments or proving points, but serving clients well, treating employees fairly, building a sustainable business. The HOA situation had taught me that I was good at this, better than I'd realized. When pushed, I could hold my ground without being cruel. I could negotiate firmly without being inflexible. I could demand fair treatment while still being reasonable. Those were valuable skills in business and in life. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "First snow of the season perfectly cleared. Thank you for everything. Hope this winter is drama-free for all of us," I replied simply. "Me too. Stay warm." Outside the office window, snow continued falling over Boulder, blanketing the city in white. Across town, in Ridgemont Hills, my neighbors were going about their days on clean roads, probably not thinking about the conflict that had consumed so much energy months earlier. That was how it should be. Drama should be temporary. Resolution should be permanent. Life should move forward. I turned back to my computer, pulling up a proposal for the Louisville portfolio. The numbers needed work. The timeline was aggressive, but it was doable. Everything was doable with enough planning and effort. That was the real lesson from the whole HOA situation. Not that revenge was sweet or that karma was real, but that competence and professionalism could overcome almost any obstacle. Do good work, treat people fairly, hold your boundaries, and eventually things work out. It wasn't always dramatic. It wasn't always satisfying in the moment. But it was sustainable, and sustainability mattered more than temporary victories. The snow kept falling. The trucks kept rolling. The work continued, and in Ridgemont Hills, a community that had been fractured by conflict slowly knitted itself back together, one cleared road and one respectful interaction at a time. That was enough. That was everything. Winter had arrived and I was ready.